Hello, this is a review video on Unit Number 4, Seeing Things New. It's the first of a series of videos that I'll be doing that will review some of the works that we covered in this neoclassical unit, the 17th and 18th century unit, that also has a few precursors to Romanticism in it. So as we take a look at our textbook, we're on page 412 and 413. I'll have some of the online material in front of you there as I go through these. But as we take a look at what the unit contains in your own textbook, you may want to mark some of these. We have the unit introduction that you need to read in addition to looking at the historical lecture, historical perspectives, focus, 1625 to 1798. On page 413 of your book, you can mark the following under whole class learning. This historical perspectives, it's called A Turbulent Time. You need to read that, go over that. And then we have poetry collection. That includes John Donne's A Valediction Forbidding Mourning. It also includes Holy Sonnet 10 by John Donne. And then our longest work that we have in the unit, that I am mostly saving for last, is the Gulliver's Travels selection here. So under whole class learning, on page 413 of your textbook, mark A Turbulent Time, you're responsible for that, Valediction Forbidding Mourning, Holy Sonnet 10, from Gulliver's Travels. Now some of this material I'm going to go over on this video. I'll go over other parts of the material on succeeding videos. Now take a look at the small group learning category on page 413. Again, reminding ourselves of our essential question, why are both vision and dissolution necessary? And as we go through, we have a few poems that we have covered in class, or will cover. To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell. So on page 413 in your textbook, mark that one, put an X by it, you're responsible for that one. Then right under there, Poetry Collection 2, To the Virgins to Make Much of Time, and Youth's the Season Made for Joys. And then under Poetry Collection 3, we're not going to do the Divine Comedy section by Dante. We're going to do the William Butler Yeats poem, The Second Coming. So on page 413 again, you see under Poetry Collection 3, mark The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. And then before fall break, the students also had a short story in the unit that goes along quite well. It's a modern short story, 20th century short story, but it goes along with our essential question, why are both vision and disillusion necessary? And that's the wonderful story Araby by James Joyce. So we will go over that one as well. Now, you know, when I give you the thematic essays, I usually require you to do one work from what I call the tertiary selection. And that's under independent learning. So again, on page 413, in your textbook, you see your third column there. It's always in purple. And you have a choice. A selection from The Pilgrim's Progress, the poetry of William Blake with The Lamb, the Tiger, and the Chimney Sweeper. You have a science article about sleep. You have a Japanese work, The Pillow Book. You also have a Romantic era poem, very imaginative poem, Kubla Khan, by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So any one of those you are to pick out and to read. Okay? So we're going to go back and we're going to take a look just to make sure you know what's required, what we've gone over in class. And we go to page 422. Now on page 422 we have our historical introduction, our unit intro. There's a reading gold selection. You can do that part if you would like. But mostly what we do there is we take a look at our unit introduction itself. And again, continuing with that idea, why are both vision and disillusion necessary? And really the essential question is dealing with why is our vision of the past and our vision of the future influencing our present, but also why vision and disillusion are necessary in framing who we are. Why is both vision and being disillusioned of that vision necessary to our development as human beings? So we're kind of continuing that idea we had back in Unit 3, how do the past and the future shape our present actions? And we're going on and thinking, well, what are those visions that we have for the future? And then why is it good that they work out sometimes, and sometimes why is it good that they don't work out sometimes? So we take a look at our unit intro. And those of you on the online edition, you have to scroll through a number of pages to finally get to where you are. And here we are, a turbulent time, voices of the period. And then that begins on the online edition, all of the historical intro. And then there is the historical intro right there. In our textbook, it's on page 422, 423, 424, 425. So make sure you read over that. Then go to page 427. And here we have the biography of John Donne, one of the most important of the metaphysical poets. And then his first poem, A Valediction Forbidding Mourning. And that's what I'd like to really start with right now with you. Metaphysical poets often used what we call metaphysical conceits. And a metaphysical conceit is an outlandish comparison that sounds really silly on the surface. But in the poem, the poet actually makes it work okay. You have two main metaphysical conceits in this poem right here. Now, the setup is that the male is going away for a while. Very typical subject matter for this period poetry. He is explaining to his loved one that although he's separated from her, they're still together. They're still a couple. And that although she's crying and she's mourning because he's leaving her for a while, he's reminding her that he will be back. As long as she stays faithful to him, he can find his way back home just fine. So we start out, as virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say the breath goes now, and some say no, so let us melt, and make no noise. No tear floods nor sigh tempests move, 'twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. Moving of the earth brings harms and fears, men reckon what it did and meant, but trepidation of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. Dull sublunary lovers love, whose souly sense cannot admit absence, because it doth remove those things which elemented it. But we by a love so much refined, that ourselves know not what it is, enter assured of the mind, careless, eyes, lips, and hands to miss. So if part of that sounds difficult to you, you're not alone. John Donne is a difficult poet many, many times. Scholars still, hundreds of years later, in articles, debate what he means in some lines. But as you read along, you can tell, okay, so the guy's going away, the girl's staying home, she's sad because he's leaving, and he's trying to convince her that everything's going to be okay. So as we go along in our stanzas, we come across this interesting stanza right here. Our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion, like gold, to airy thinness beat. Now there's a metaphysical conceit for you, and it's in the form, you notice, of a simile because it uses that word like. To him, he and his relationship with his lady, it's like a piece of gold. Gold is very malleable. It can be shaped. It can be stretched. A gold brick, for example, can make gold wire miles long. So he says, even though we are part of that same piece of gold, our love is that gold. I'm leaving for a while. We're being stretched for a while. But we're still part of the same thing. And we'll eventually get back together again. But the more famous of the metaphysical conceits that he uses in the poem is this next one that is really outlandish sounding. And it's comparing his love to his lady to a compass, like you draw a circle with, that kind of compass. Our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion like gold to airy thinness beat. So there's the gold image. Here's the compass image. If they be two, they are two so as stiff twin compasses are two. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth of the other do. And though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth roam, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. Such wilt thou be to me, who must like the other foot obliquely run. Thy firmness makes my circle just, and makes me end where I begun. All right, what's he saying there? If you have the 2 points of the compass, right? She is the point of the compass on the piece of paper, staying steady, staying faithful. He's the pencil of the compass. He's out roaming around, but as long as she's faithful, as long as that point stays at home and waits for him, then his circle, his voyages are complete, and then he gets to come back home to her. And so it's a way of telling her that he's coming back home, but she has a responsibility too. She has to be faithful while he's away on his voyaging. Holy Sonnet 10 is the other side of John Donne. When he was young, he wrote many love poems. Then he became the main preacher at St. Paul's Cathedral, and he tended to write religious verse. His wife, by that point, had died. John Donne had undergone a number of sicknesses himself, and so his attitude turned very serious later on in his life. The very, very famous poem here called Death Be Not Proud. Death be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou think'st thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be much pleasure, then from thee much more must flow. And soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and souls delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell. And poppy or charms can make us sleep as well and better than thy stroke. How swell'st thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. So here, Donne is putting death in his place. Death is often seen as a scary monster, and Donne right here is saying, no, you're not very scary. You're my servant. Look who you hang around with. You know, you have poison and war and sickness as your friends. You're a slave yourself to fate, chance, kings, and even poor people, desperate men. But we are eternal. When we die, we will wake up again. We will live in eternity. He says, but death, you're going to die forever. You'll be no more. So in a way, these holy sonnets are to encourage himself when he was going through his sickness, that if he ended up dying, he at least knew he had an eternal home waiting for him. Death itself, though, would be wiped out of existence one day. So those are our first 2 works by John Donne. We also have on page 431 an exercise that we did, a comprehension check, 3 questions on valediction, and 3 on Holy Sonnet. Those I will continue on video number 2, and we'll review the answers to those.